The most popular television show in Afghan history. Every Afghan family wanted to watch it. They had to suspend functions at 8:30. Weddings were reported to be interrupted, so guests could cluster around the TV set and then turn their attention back to the bride and groom. Crime went up at 8:30. I have read a Reuters dispatch, so this is not Indian propaganda, a British news agency, of how robbers in the town of Mazar-e-Sharif stripped a vehicle of its windshield wipers, its hubcaps, its side view mirrors, any moving part they could find at 8:30, because the watchmen were busy watching the TV rather than minding the store, and they scrawled on the windshield in a reference to the show's heroine, Tulsi Zindabad, long live Tulsi. That's soft power. And that is what India is developing through the E part of TED, its own entertainment industry. The same is true, of course, we don't have time for too many more examples, but it's true of our music, of our dance, of our art, yoga, Ayurveda, even Indian cuisine. I mean, the proliferation of Indian restaurants. Since I first went abroad as a student in the mid-70s, and what I see today, you can't go to a mid-sized town in Europe or North America and not find an Indian restaurant. It may not be a very good one, but today in Britain, for example, Indian restaurants in Britain employ more people than the coal mining, shipbuilding, and iron and steel industries combined. So the empire can strike back. But with this increasing awareness of India, with the yoga and the Ayurveda and so on, with tales like Afghanistan comes something vital in the information era. The sense that in today's world, it's not the side of the bigger army that wins, it's the country that tells a better story that prevails. And India is and must remain, in my view, the land of the better story. Stereotypes are changing. I mean, again, having gone to the US as a student in the mid-70s, I knew what the image of India was then, if there was an image at all. Today, people in Silicon Valley and elsewhere speak of the IITs, the Indian Institutes of Technology, with the same reverence they used to accord to MIT. This can sometimes have unintended consequences, okay? When I had a friend, a history major like me, who was accosted at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam by an anxiously perspiring European saying, you're Indian, can you help me fix my laptop? We've gone from the image of India as land of fakirs lying on beds of nails and snake charmers or the Indian rope trick, to the image of India as a land of mathematical geniuses, computer wizards, software gurus. But that too is transforming the Indian story around the world. But there's something more substantive to that. The story rests on a fundamental platform of political pluralism. It's a civilizational story to begin with, because India has been an open society for millennia. India gave refuge to the Jews fleeing the first temple of the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians, and thereafter by the Romans. In fact, legend has it that when doubting Thomas, the apostle, St. Thomas, landed on the shores of Kerala, my home state, somewhere around 52 AD, he was welcomed on shore by a flute-playing Jewish girl. And to this day, it remains the only Jewish diaspora in the history of the Jewish people which has never encountered a single incident of anti-Semitism. That's the Indian story. Islam came peacefully to the south, slightly more differently complicated history in the north, but all of these religions have found a place and a welcome home in India. You know, we just celebrated this year our general elections, the biggest exercise in democratic franchise in human history, and the next one will be even bigger because our voting population keeps growing by 20 million a year. But the fact is that the last elections 5 years ago gave the world the extraordinary phenomenon of an election being won by a woman political leader of Italian origin and Roman Catholic faith, Sonia Gandhi, who then made way for a Sikh, Manmohan Singh, to be sworn in as Prime Minister by a Muslim, President Abdul Kalam, in a country 81% Hindu. And this is India, and of course it's all the more striking because it was 4 years later that we all applauded the US, the oldest democracy in the modern world, more than 220 years of free and fair elections, which took till last year to elect a president or a vice president who wasn't white, male, or Christian. So maybe, he is Christian, I beg your pardon, and he is male, but he isn't white. All the others have been all those three. All his predecessors have been all those three, and that's the point I was trying to make. But the issue is that when I talked about that example, it's not just about talking about India. It's not propaganda, because ultimately that electoral outcome had nothing to do with the rest of the world. It was essentially India being itself. And ultimately, it seems to me, that always works better than propaganda. Governments aren't very good at telling stories, but people see a society for what it is, and that, it seems to me, is what ultimately will make a difference in today's information era and today's TED age. So India now is no longer the nationalism of ethnicity or language or religion, because we have every ethnicity known to mankind practically, we have every religion known to mankind, with the possible exception of Shintoism, that has some Hindu element somewhere. we have 23 official languages recognized in our constitution, and those of you who cashed your money here might be surprised to see how many scripts there are on the rupee note spelling out the denominations. We've got all of that. We don't even have geography uniting us, because the natural geography of the subcontinent, framed by the mountains and the sea, was hacked by the partition with Pakistan in 1947. In fact, you can't even take the name of the country for granted, because the name India comes from the river Indus, which flows in Pakistan. But the whole point is that India is the nationalism of an idea. It's an idea of an ever land, emerging from an ancient civilization, united by a shared history, but sustained above all by pluralist democracy. That is a 21st century story as well as an ancient one. And it's the nationalism of an idea that essentially says you can endure differences of caste, creed, color, culture, cuisine, custom and costume, consonant for that matter, and still rally around a consensus. And the consensus is on a very simple principle, that in a diverse, plural democracy like India, you don't really have to agree on everything all the time, so long as you agree on the ground rules of how you will disagree. The great success story of India, a country that so many learned scholars and journalists assumed would disintegrate in the 50s and 60s, is that it managed to maintain consensus on how to survive without consensus. Now that is the India that is emerging into the 21st century. And I do want to make the point that if there is anything worth celebrating about India, it isn't military muscle, economic power. All of that's necessary. But we still have huge amounts of problems to overcome. Somebody said, we are super poor and we're also super power. We can't really be both of those. We have to overcome our poverty. We have to deal with the hardware of development, the ports, the roads, the airports, all the infrastructural things we need to do, and the software of development, the human capital, the need for the ordinary person in India to be able to have a couple of square meals a day, to be able to send his or her children to a decent school, and to aspire to work a job that will give them opportunities in their lives that can transform themselves. But it's all taking place, this great adventure of conquering those challenges, those real challenges which none of us can pretend don't exist. But it's all taking place in an open society, in a rich and diverse and plural civilization, in one that is determined to liberate and fulfill the creative energies of its people. That's why India belongs at TED, and that's why TED belongs in India. Thank you very much.